to be with you.
Yeah, I'm happy. I'm having you. Finally, I'm happy despite the challenges for today. We are going to have a smooth show. Welcome, dear audience. We have our guest, my American colleague, my friend. Um, I'm happy to have you. I think before going any further, I have to say to the audience that they should expect a great show. And they are going to expect more episodes from you, sharing with us on different intervals, on different topics. And we expect to have the best out of the best, and we expect to learn a lot from you. Now, I'd like you to briefly tell the audience who is Anya.
Sure. So I'm Anya Overmann. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, in the middle of the United States. It's very much part of the Bible Belt. My parents both grew up Catholic themselves, but before they met each other, decided that they were atheists, that they didn't believe in God. And then they met each other and they got married and they had me and my younger brother. And about the age that I was in kindergarten, so like 5 years old, they had somebody come in to sort of assess our intelligence with these little flashcards. And these flashcards had these different cultural symbols that you would see, you know, just living life in St. Louis, Missouri. And they're flipping through these cards with me and my brother, and we're getting all of them right. And then they get to the cross, and we didn't know what it was. So at that point, my parents decided, you know, it's probably worth finding a place for our children to be educated about religion without being indoctrinated by it. So they ended up finding this place called the Ethical Society of St. Louis. And the best way that I can describe that, and the way that I described it to my friends growing up, is that it's a lot like a church, but without the religion. So it's really taking these communal parts of church that are really great and the support that you get from that community and just extracting the religious bit out of it. And so every Sunday I was coming to the Ethical Society. I had the equivalent of what we were calling at the time Sunday school. It's been renamed to be less religious. But it really was just every week a 1 hour class. And I'd learn about different religions, different, moralities and all sorts of things that, most kids don't get the opportunity to learn, which I was very fortunate to be in that position and be able to get that education. It was really special. And then when I was about middle school age, so like confirmation age, the same age that, kids go through confirmation in church, my coming of age was going around to these different religious groups, these different, congregations, and experiencing what they were like for myself and, my peers at the time. So that was a really interesting experience. There was no forcing of atheism or lack of belief in God. It was very much a, hey, we are very open to whatever you want to believe. And in fact, we want to give you all of the information so that you can make a decision for yourself. So going through to all these different places and kind of learning about the religions really, for me, solidified, okay, I don't believe in a God. I really appreciate that I got all these experiences, but it's not for me. So that really solidified it for me. And then as I was a teenager, I started getting even more involved. I got involved on a more national level with other ethical societies and other, teenagers around the country. And then when I became a young adult, I got even more involved. And I ended up working with Humanists International for a while. That's how Kato and I met, is through Humanists International. So it just kind of escalated into this really passionate, kind of career in humanism and activism. So that's kind of my general background. I'm a writer by trade. I'm a freelancer, so I work for myself. And I've been living as a digital nomad for about 3 years now. I'm currently in Medellin, Colombia. And yeah, I love this life. It's a little tricky at times, but it allows me to do this work that I'm passionate about with humanism. And I'm sure you're going to ask me a question about this, Kato, but yeah, so lately a lot of my activism has been critical of this movement that I grew up in and have really, garnered this passion for. And we can get into that in a bit, but I just want to preface this entire conversation by saying I'm criticizing these things because they're very important to me, because they're very special, and because they made me who I am. So I'm criticizing out of love, not out of hate. So just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you so much, Anya. That's lovely. Of course, I have to tell the audience that I met Anya about 10 years ago, and she has been a compatriot, a colleague, a friend, everything I would like to see in a humanist lady. I'm greatly proud of Anya, and I'm sure, very, very sure that we keep on learning from each other, and we keep on inspiring me in so many ways. And of course, I know that those who are going to be able to listen into your discussion, be able to be inspired, get motivated to learn to do a few things differently. I learned from you about nomadic humanism, for example. There are many things I've been learning from you silently. I'm also an admirer, in a way, very silent admirer of yours, I should say, that you inspire me a lot in the way you do your things, and I'm happy for you. Now, having said that, for the benefit of the viewers, again, I should say my name is Kato Mukasa. I didn't introduce myself. Of course, I was minding more about the guest. Our guest tonight is Anya. Anya is my American humanist colleague. We have worked together for some years. So I'm very confident that at Call to Africa, Activism Africa shall be able to benefit from expertise and experience. Anya, welcome to the show once again. I'm glad you are here. I'm glad you have been patient as we fixed our connectivity with my colleagues in East Africa. I'm in the UK at the moment, so I had no challenges with the connection, but my colleagues who were behind the administration of the StreamYard had challenges. Having said that, I have to say a few things before we continue. One, happy birthday to you. It was just a few days ago.
Thank you.
Because I know there are people who are going to see for the first time. I will keep on reminding them about who you are, because we are watched by different people all over the world. And of course, even when the show is done, we upload it on our YouTube so people can watch it 2 months, 1 year after today. So we are very confident that whatever we say here is for the legacy, is for the posterity. People are going to watch it more years from today. So I keep on reminding them who we are and the guest we have and why we have that guest. Now, I'm so happy we have you, Anya, today. You have talked about your background from a Catholic background. I am from a Catholic background, a very conservative one. Apart from my father, who was very secular, my mother up to now is a Catholic, very staunch Catholic. So I can share with you, but I'm so astonished. I'm so impressed with the way your family handled it, with the way they had this ethical cultural society. It is lacking in Africa up today. I mean, you were so many years ahead of us in Africa that you had this kind of arrangement, which I never had. And I should tell you briefly, to augment your presentation, to make it more lively, that I got to know about humanism when I joined university in 1999. Yet for you got to know about this whole stuff when you're way back as a child. I mean, this is where you have the advantage over some of us, that you have grown into the movement. That's why when I feel your pain, I can appreciate it, because you have been part of this movement for all your life, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, since I was 5.
I joined it, yes, since I joined 5. I joined it when I was 20. And you joined it when you are 5. You can look at that. Viewers, you can see why she is passionate about this movement and why she shares this kind of positive criticism to make the movement better. Now, having said that, Anya, I know very well you are a writer, you were a digital creator, you are an international humanist, and all that, and that's all beautiful. I would like you to take us through your joining the leadership in the ethical movement. What inspired you to join the leadership in the ethical movement?
Well, so when I first stepped into a leadership position, I was still a teenager. I was only 15. And at the time we had a very similar Christian structure of a youth group where we met every Sunday for about 2 hours. But instead of talking about religion, we'd talk about a handful of different subject matter, some social issues, political issues, all sorts. Excuse me. Pardon. So we had this very unique experience, and that's really what inspired me, because I was around these other kids my age, other teenagers, all from very different schools. We were all, we didn't see each other during the week. This was the only time that we saw each other. And for me personally, I think that community was really pivotal in my in kind of helping me come of age, because I found a lot of my friends at school were very, it's not terrible to have friends that are like this, but they were very academic focused, very like achievement focused, which is good. But when you're trying to grow in other ways, that can be kind of stifling. So when you're trying to, and all of these friends were also religious too, or not all of them, but most of them. So we had some, points where we didn't really, we just didn't connect. So having these friends on Sundays that I could connect with was really important. And that's what kind of drove this passion, is the more that I met, teenagers of a like mind, the more I was like, wow, this is really cool. And I feel really connected to these people. And I'd love to help build this community that, holds space for all of us. So that's what really drove me. And it was, it was a little difficult after I graduated from high school, because as you may know, you graduate high school in the US, most people leave like their hometown. Some leave the state, they go really far away for college, and they're very far away from these communities, and they sort of lose touch. It's very natural, but the coming back to these communities it makes that harder because of that big life change. For me, I was really, I really valued this community. So I really tried to make an effort to come back after I was done with school. But I came back in a very different way, because I, at that point, was very motivated to get out of the US and travel and learn more about the world. So I wasn't so focused on US humanism or US ethical culture. At that time, I was really looking at the world, at large, and seeing how I could, further this humanistic movement, outside the US as well as inside. So that's what really drove me. And it really, at the end of the day, I mean, the answer to your question is connections. It's the communal, feeling that really drove me, because I didn't feel that so much in school with my friends, and I didn't feel it so much, in other contexts. So to feel this way every Sunday with the community was really, really important for driving that passion.
Yes, thank you so much, Anya. Are there specific positions you took on in the ethical society that you can share with us, and what were your responsibilities by then?
Yeah, so when I was 15, I guess the first role I took on was the youth leader of the youth group, and that was like, I don't know, 20 teens. And then the national role that I took on, we had this annual conference of all these teenagers from different ethical societies around the US. And I was the president of that for, I think, a year or so. So yeah, I really, that's really where I cut my teeth on leadership in general. I didn't really have that opportunity in school. So I really had this opportunity to be, try out leadership. And I guess that also drove the passion too, is that opportunity.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And the viewers would like to know, for example, the difference between this ethical society and the Unitarian movement. I understand that is what they call the Unitarian Church, which is devoid of the dogma. Is there any connection with the ethical movement and the Unitarian, the Universal Unitarian Church?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So historically, no, but in more recent times, the way that the values of ethical culture and the Unitarian Church, they've realized that they're very similar values. So what ends up happening is there's a lot of crossover between the two. So a lot of leaders will get trained, and they'll kind of swap in and out of these communities because the leadership is so similar because of the values. So that's kind of the similarity point. But from a historical perspective, they started out very differently. I mean, ethical culture was actually founded by a Jewish rabbi that immigrated from Germany to New York. And this rabbi's name was Felix Adler. And Felix Adler felt like, this is great. Temple is good, but I could really do without all of the religion. And I'd really love to just keep the, community part and have, a society that with a really supportive membership that also supports the community. So they did stuff like, cook meals for people in the community and, send out nurses to sick people to help with them. And they started a school. So there was all sorts of things that they started with the ethical culture movement. And then Unitarians, I'm not as familiar with their history, but they are Christian. Like they do, most of them, I do believe in a God. So they kind of stemmed from religion, but very differently. So it's a weird, that we've descended from religion and we do have some crossover now, but it's not, they're just very different, but also very similar. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's a very good one because there is a colleague who moved from Burundi and was a humanist as far as I know, and ended up joining the Unitarian Church. So I was wondering always how this person could convince me that they are humanists. Of course, someone was telling me, they don't have God in their kind of teaching and all that kind of stuff. But I couldn't believe it, that someone could say I'm a humanist, then I'm a Unitarian Church, universal, whatever. But it's good to have explained this kind of thing. Now, having said that, Anya, I know that you're also part of the American Humanist Association.
Yeah.
At one point.
I am a member.
May you please take us through your membership, your role there, and the work of this association, and of course, if there are programs that have been part of in this association, so we can be able to know what has been your contribution towards the bigger picture of the American Humanist Association.
Yeah. So, and I just want to make a distinction here real quick. The Ethical Society and the movement that I grew up in, the national organization for that is the American Ethical Union. I'm on the board of that organization. I am involved with American Humanist Association also, but in a much lesser capacity. I'm a member. I'm connected to a lot of the leadership there. And my capacity in that movement has very much been kind of just a supporting member role, more sitting back and trying to serve as kind of like a support system for people in that organization that feel like the organization isn't doing enough. And we can get into that more, but I just wanted to make that distinction first, that there's different organizations and I have very different involvement in one versus the other.
Yes, so you have talked about the American Ethical Union, if I get it right? So this is where you are a part of the board members. Correct. Yes, when did you join this, and what has been part of your activities in this organization?
Yeah, so I came onto this board last year, July of 2022, and a lot of this board has inherited, some pretty large problems from past boards. So we're currently finding ourselves in a place as an organization in a time of crisis. We're in a very much a do or die moment where we've realized, things need to change or we as an organization will not survive. So this is a really critical and pivotal moment. And I just want to say it's not just this organization that I've witnessed experiencing this event of needing to pivot, needing to transition into something else. The American Humanist Association is going through something very similar. And then there's other organizations around the US that are also going through something similar, and outside of the US as well. Organizations within Latin America are going through something like that. I know that there's organizations in Africa as well that are, that have these fits and starts where they also have these realizations. So it's really not an isolated thing. But I think because this movement is it's very small. I mean, it's only like 1,500, 2,000 people in the US. That's pretty small. And I think because it's so small, it's very difficult to kind of see the bigger picture for a lot of these people that have been involved for a long time. And it's hard to see, when you've been involved in a movement that's like 150 years old, that, that it might need to change in a really major way. I mean, it's a hard thing to accept. It's an institution. So to say, hey, we really need to pivot or we might need to shut down is, that's kind of sounding the alarm. So it's a very interesting time. And that's sort of what we've been focused on this year is with the issues that we've inherited, and the reality of the situation is that these issues aren't going away. They're very established. So it's going to take a lot of work to deconstruct a lot of the systems that have led to these issues. And it's a big commitment. And unless we have the right people in place, it's not a sure thing that it's going to work out. So that's kind of the overview of what we're looking at in the AEU and just kind of in general in the humanist movement is this, this kind of everything's coming to a head, and we're realizing this movement, these organizations might not survive unless we pivot them to serve the times that we're in now. So that's that.
Wow, that's a good one. Thank you so much, Anya. Going to the next step where we have been also a leader, I will talk about the Humanist International. Now, I'd like you to tell the viewers how you ended up being also part of the Humanist International organization. What was your journey to it like? And what inspired you to join Humanist International, where I met you finally?
Yeah, that was 2014 in Oslo, Norway, I believe, is where we met each other.
That's where we first met.
Yeah, and that was my first Humanist International event. So I believe what it was that my youth organization within the AEU suddenly gained this interest in the youth section, which at the time was called International Humanist and Ethical Youth Organization, IHAO. Yes. A ridiculously long acronym, and I'm very glad that that was rebranded to Young Humanist International. It's less of a mouthful. So, so that I ended up going as a representative to the youth section for the AEU back in 2014, and that was when Young Humanist was having its own assemblies separate from Humanist International. And that was my first kind of foray into the international humanist world. And I remember speaking with a lot of Norwegian humanists and just being completely blown away by the structures, the money behind all of it. Like, they have some impressive programming there, and just incredible organizing. So I was really impressed. And I started really learning about the political spectrum even more than I knew then, because, coming from the US, our spectrum is very right-leaning. And what we consider to be left-leaning in US politics is really still just kind of centrist or right. So, so going to Norway and having that exposure to, oh, actually, we have like this whole spectrum of political parties that, you know, it stretches a lot broader than the spectrum you're used to in the United States. That was very eye-opening for me too. So, you know, being able to learn these things so quickly in just a conference weekend, I was like, wow, I really need to get myself more involved. There's a lot to learn here. So that's what really kind of sparked it for me. That and the connections. I mean, I still have friends, you know, like you from that time that, you know, we gathered in 2014 back in Norway. And I thought those, you know, it's really cool to make connections like that because you don't plan it really. I mean, it just sort of happens. And, you know, if you stick with people for long enough, it's really cool to see them, you know, you grow over time. So for me, it was a combination of, wow, I have so much to learn, and wow, these people are really cool. So that was my main motivation.
Quite impressive. Yes, you are right. In fact, I was remembering as if I had first met you in 2012 in Oxford, that you have reminded me it was 2014 in
Right.
Oslo, Norway.
Yeah.
I remember when we met there and we had that youth leadership team from different parts of the world, and all of you guys were charming and everyone was enthusiastic about humanism and taking it forward. And I'm happy that that fire hasn't been extinguished yet.
Yeah.
You are still moving strong and strong. I'm proud of what we have achieved so far, and I do believe we are going to inspire quite a number of people, and more so, yes, more so ladies, because they keep on getting shy when it comes to doing humanistic work. So I know you inspire quite a number of people without even knowing it, I should say, who look up to you and say, yes, I think I can also be another Anya in my own locality.
Oh,
and I keep on telling you, yeah, keep on going on, because you inspire rather a number of people with what you have achieved so far, given your only 30 years on this space we call Earth, but we have been able to go places, we have been able to do things people simply think about, dream about. We have been able to move the world. In one of the episodes, we shall have you here, we shall talk about your digital humanism. We shall have a topic on that. You take us through what you do, what it means to do that, the challenges, how people can learn from you. I think we shall have an episode on that, because I do believe that you have a lot to share with the world, Anya. In so many things you do, in writing, your kind of work, people need to know how they can be part of it, how they can be part of your company, part of the organization. I mean, because we have the other life where you earn a living. People should know that. I mean, we should need to use this platform to put your work before people, to appreciate you more, to get to learn from you. So, having said that, of course, I've been following a lot of work you do over the years. Of course, I know you have been part of the youth chapter for a long time. You have been able to inspire people, young people in Africa, where I stayed all my life, where I've been able to see people that I've been working with on the board, making them do things, you know, helping them, motivate them. It has been very encouraging. I should salute you for that. And having said that, now I want us to look at humanism from your own perspective, Anya.
Okay.
As a humanist leader, as an experienced one at that matter, what is your understanding of humanism?
Whoa, that's a big question, Kato. Woo. All right. Well, so I guess
start from anywhere.
All right, and this is from my perspective, correct? Okay, so I have a different view of humanism than I think a lot of humanists do. A lot of the humanist movement is really credited to European Enlightenment. And while there is a lot to be said for European Enlightenment, it's not the only enlightenment that's happened around the world. And there are a lot of other cultures that have humanist ideas and humanist values that I don't know are appropriately credited. You know, Ubuntu is humanist. There are lots of other humanist ideals just like that. And I think we really focus too much on European Enlightenment as the originators of these ideas, which is not really fair.
That's a good one.
So that's really my thing, is I want to get away from constantly focusing on these white male voices that talk about humanism. While important, they do have value, but there are so many other voices out there that also have really important things to say with perspectives that we just haven't heard as much about. So that's my view, is that we could be doing a lot with humanism to really pay homage to the multiple belief systems and values that are humanist without being explicitly called humanist, right? So I think for me, I am less concerned about the European-centric secular humanism and more concerned with, where does humanism show up already? Where are we not calling things humanist that are humanist? Because I think we get really particular about that sometimes, and that it actually happens a lot more within ethical culture, which is really ironic to me, because the motto for ethical culture is deed before creed, or deed above creed, which I love.
Good one.
I love that. And that's part of the reason I think they get along so well with Unitarians, is that, you know, so what if they believe in God? We have a very similar value set. And if we're not stepping on each other's toes, then we might as well organize together. And I think that's really kind of awesome. But backtracking a bit, the reason that I find that it's so ironic is that a lot of people, especially now, as we're trying to go through this transition, are invoking this, well, that's not ethical culture, or that person isn't from the movement, which is a very like no true Scotsman argument, which is very ironic in a movement that says deed before creed. So it shouldn't matter, right? It shouldn't matter what you believe. If your values are in alignment, that's it. You're an ethical culturist. You're a humanist. That's all that should matter. That's all that should be the barrier of entry into the movement. But we don't do that. We don't necessarily do that. And I think another thing that I want to mention too is that humanism really, really focuses on secularism. And I think that's good. I think it's good that there's a focus on that. I think there are other facets of systemic oppression that go beyond religion, but are very connected to religion, that we don't always acknowledge to the same degree. Now, one of those things, and maybe you know what I'm going to say, Kato, is white supremacy culture. That is a huge one. And it's a huge thing that came with European Enlightenment as well. I mean, that wasn't a thing that they addressed at any point during European Enlightenment, because it was a very different thing then. And now, with the Americas being colonized and having this whole new world for white supremacy culture to thrive, it's really been just seeped into the roots of the movement in a way that it's really, really difficult to undo without speaking directly to it and having conversations about it on a regular basis. And that's not something that humanists do. Humanists are not committed to doing that work yet. It's something that I'm really hoping that we can dive into, because really, when you think about it, I mean, race and religion go hand in hand. They're two oppressive forces that work together and are very effective together as a system. So that's my main thing, is that I think there are social issues that are stemming from these systemic, oppressive systems, like patriarchy, like white supremacy, that are very much rooted in humanism, and we haven't paid enough attention to dismantle all of that. So as a result, Kato, and I know you know this firsthand, as a result, a lot of people that are humanist end up feeling very excluded or hurt by humanist organizations, because they put forward this secular forward messaging without addressing other systemic oppression. And it hurts people. It really hurts. And it's happened all over the world. I have a whole community of people that have been hurt by organized humanism. And it's really sad because they need a place. We all need a place. We're kind of misfits, right? Like we are not part of the religious majority, but we're also, we don't want to be, subjected to this systemic oppression that humanism is perpetuating. So that is the main criticism that I have right now, is that this movement is not doing enough to address the whole puzzle of systemic oppression. They're really focused on this one puzzle piece, this one part of the oppressive puzzle, which is religion, which is important, right, Kato? I mean, it's very important for us to focus on how oppressive religion can be, but it's not everything. And if we get too focused on it, we lose sight of this bigger puzzle and how these things work together to oppress people. So, yeah.
Wow, that's quite good. Very, very, very incisive, very deep into the core of the matter. Of course, we are going to be having more of this talk going forward because it's a big topic, Anya.
It's big.
But what I'm doing tonight is to have a background to all the subsequent episodes we shall be having. This is what I'm doing right now with you, so that whoever is going to be able to watch our shows will be able to know where we came from. We'll be able to revert back to episode 1 to understand what is Anya's appreciation of humanism. Who is she? How did she join humanism? Where has she worked? The humanist circle. So people should know exactly who you are, what informs your decision, so that they can be able to appreciate where you are right now. So in today's episode, I've been able to dig that foundation. This is what I'm doing today. Dig that foundation, people to appreciate who is our guest, that informs, what is it that informs her kind of thinking. And I do appreciate that, Anya. Of course, we shall be going to what's wrong with humanism today. What's wrong with organized humanism today? It's going to be a big thing. And trust me, Anya, I'll also be giving my own examples from Africa. So as you give us those examples, I'll be giving my own observations from Africa. So we make this show really very rich. Now, having said that, for the viewers and those listening in from wherever you are, Anya has been able to define for us her understanding of humans, to give us that background so that we can be able to appreciate where has this organized humanism gone wrong. Is it the foundation, which, to be sincere, more Europeanized, if I can use that, or as you say, more into white hands, what you call white primacy?
Yeah, I think it's both, though. I think it's a little of both. I think the fact that it's rooted in European Enlightenment and not earnestly drawn from other cultures' versions of humanism, that's problematic. And in combination with that, yes, the leadership now.
Yeah, because people, in my understanding, my own observation, where I've worked with Humanist International, my previous works for over 20 years, I have observed that there is this tendency, you rightly say so. We shall go to that in our next episode when we talk about what's wrong with this kind of movement. I've also seen it. I know what you speak is the absolute truth, where certain people tend to think they know more humanism than the rest. They tend to think they own it than the rest. We shall be able to address that, Anya. But before we go to that, going back to the foundation of that, one of your articles, and I'm going to encourage the viewers, of course, I'm going to request you to give us the names of the blogs where they can find information, because we want to use this platform to market your work, so that whoever is going to be able to watch this kind of show be able to go to your page and see what we have written. What I can tell viewers tonight is that Anya is a prolific writer. She has been writing a lot of stuff. She shares with me her writings. I've been reading them with enthusiasm. In one of your pieces, you deconstructed humanism in a way that you talked about the golden principle in a very unique way. I would invite you right now, Anya, to break down what you wrote in that article for the viewers, how you view the golden principle, how it should be made better, because humanists see it from a different angle, and there is a way you brought it from a different angle, and you made it much easier to understand. May you please take us through that? First of all, you state for us what is the golden principle as per humanism, organized. Then what was your suggestion? Because I read the article, very beautiful one, but I know many of the viewers haven't read that. You may direct us where the article is, but also go ahead and tell us what was your perspective on this very subject.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, we had a good discussion about that, Kato, several months ago when that article came out. And that article is on Only Sky. I can drop it in the comments later or something.
Yes.
But basically, yeah, so that article is about the golden rule or the golden principle, which is treat others the way that you want to be treated. And humanists often use that as a justification to say, hey, religious people, look at how easy it is to be good. We have the golden rule. You follow the golden rule. This religion follows the golden rule. That religion follows the golden rule. So do we. So look at how easy it is to be moral. Look at how easy it is to be good without a God. That's the argument that most humanists make. Now, I want to take that further, because I think that's a great entry point to understanding morality on a basic level. Totally makes sense. But it's very basic. It's not understanding that just because a human is a human doesn't mean that they want to be treated exactly the same way that you want to be treated. Everybody has preferences. Everybody has different experiences. Everybody has different needs. So by generically treating people in a very one-size-fits-all kind of morality, it's not as dynamic and nuanced as it needs to be. And that's kind of the gist of the piece. But it really, the problem that I have with that is when we settle on that. It's totally fine to talk about the golden rule and say, hey, we should really aim to treat each other better. And a good starting point is to think about how you want to be treated and how, another person might receive that. That's a good starting point. But we need to take it a step further and say, what does that person need? Because they aren't me. I don't know what they need. I don't know what their experiences are. They might need something different from me. And maybe how I want to be treated is exactly the way they don't want to be treated. So there's a lot of nuance involved. And I think, for the sake of saying, hey, look, we don't need to follow God to follow the golden rule, sure. But to water down ethics and morality to that level and then not add the nuance back in is destructive. It's not helpful. It's stopping the conversation too soon. We need to keep having that conversation and say, okay, how can we keep pushing our individual morality? Just keep pushing and pushing and pushing to make sure that we're just adding a little bit more nuance back in as we're learning so that we can really appreciate those differences about each other. And we're not projecting this one size fits all prescriptive morality on other people. So that's the gist. I mean, like I said, the way that this plays out in real life, for example, let's say a white man atheist in the UK says, oh, I follow the golden rule. And I'm talking to this trans man. So I'm going to treat this trans man the way that I want to be treated. So I'm going to treat him, X. That might not go well. In fact, it probably won't. And I'm speaking very generically about something that has happened in real life. So we need to take a moment before we blanket apply the golden rule to everything and then leave the conversation at that. We need to use that as a stepping stone, in the same way that humanists often recommend using atheism as a stepping stone. Atheism is not a good settling point, because atheism just means you don't believe in God, right? That's it. There's no attached value system with atheism. It's merely a stepping stone to some other value system. In the same way, the golden rule is also a stepping stone into a more advanced, nuanced, complex value system. So that's my take on the golden rule.
Yes, Anya, in your article, you did suggest something beyond do to others what you want to do to you. What was that?
My suggestion, it was do unto others the way they want to be treated. So that requires information, though, right, Kato? You can't just know that. So that requires doing some work. And I think that's the part that trips people up, is that, like, you can't just show up and know what someone needs and how they want to be treated. You have to ask them. You have to do some communicating and relationship building, so you know this is how this person wants to be treated. This is how this person wants to be addressed. This is how this person would like to be acknowledged when they show up. So it goes beyond you and goes to them. It's all about them, not about you. Yeah, that's it. Got it.
I love the way you explained it and the way you gave examples of businesses doing what we call corporate social responsibility because they simply want to show off, which in return is going to pay them back because it's kind of good publicity they are looking for. And the examples you gave, the capitalism, the way you handle it, and how it can be masked as humanism, I mean, it was spot on.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, these are the challenges with humanism, where people are simply transacting, people are simply doing business under the banner of humanism. I mean, that is it in a way. And as humanists, these are things we need to put to the light. We can be able to check themselves and know we have done these mistakes. How do we make them better? That's why I've been encouraging people to look at your pieces. These articles I've been writing, they are quite very informative. I think we want to add something there before we move to another part.
I was just going to add, I'm working on a piece currently called What is Nonprofit Industrial Complex? Maybe people listening are familiar with the term military industrial complex. There's a lot of industrial complex attached to other words. And really what that means is it's a capitalist-driven market. So when we're talking about nonprofits, there's a nefarious element of capitalism behind that, because the people that are giving money are essentially driving the outcomes of that nonprofit. So if a very wealthy gentleman comes along and donates a very hefty check to a nonprofit, there's a very good chance that that gentleman is going to have some stipulations for how to spend that money. And there's also a very good chance that those stipulations could be outside the mission and vision of that nonprofit. That's something called a mission drift. And it's something that humanist organizations are very, they fall into that trap quite a bit with mission drift. And it's not just humanism, it's really all nonprofits. It's very difficult not to. But it's a real problem because it does really push us away from the authentic, reason for the existence of these organizations, and, makes them fall victim to the clutches of capitalism, just like every other, organization. So it's a bummer, but I'm writing about this, and, I'll have more information about that probably the next time we talk.
Great. That's very, very good. Anya, in your writings, again, you have talked about humanism as work and not as self-satisfaction. What do you mean by that when you say humanism is work?
Yeah, so that's actually a quote that I shared from my friend Kyle Nienhaus. who's also from St. Louis and is also a member of the Ethical Society there. He said, yes, humanism is work, not smug satisfaction. And what's meant by that? So a lot of people who leave religion and then decide they need to transition away from atheism into a more, sturdy value system, they often come into humanism. And then they feel really, really good, surrounded by all these values, by all these people that also share these values, by organizations that fund activities or projects or events that uphold these values and create more exposure for them. That creates this really good feeling. And oftentimes that feeling is used as okay, check the box, I'm done. I did the work. And that's not the work. That is just experiencing what it's like to be in a community that feels really good. And that's great. I encourage that. Everybody deserves that. Every human deserves that feeling. But we have to go beyond that. If we're really going to be humanist and we're going to stand behind humanist values, we have to embody them and live them every single day. And that's work. That's what it means. That's what the work is. It's living these values every day, and it's not easy. It's difficult because doing the right thing is hard. It's not easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it, right? And that's why I dismiss the golden rule. If it was easy for everybody to be treated in a way that makes them feel like they can be fully them, then we wouldn't have this issue of this massive chasm between intent and impact. But we have that. And that's often because of this golden rule type thinking. Well, I'm treating this person the way that I want to be treated. So what the hell is wrong with them? Why aren't they liking the way I'm treating them? That's the issue, is this very massive chasm between, well, this is the way that I'd like to be treated. So there's a very wide spectrum of human experience. And by showing up and being around people that share these values, you're giving yourself a little dopamine hit. Your brain chemicals are like, yes. But that hard work is not going to give you the same dopamine hit. It's just not. Because it's hard and it's going to give you all these emotions. It's going to give you anxiety. It's going to make you feel conflicted and you're going to feel uncomfortable and sit with discomfort a lot. So that's not a pleasant feeling. And it's hard to keep people tied into that work unless they're also getting that warm, fuzzy community feeling with it. So both of those things are very important. But I think people often rely on that feeling of warm fuzzy because on the surface, it seems like enough. Because I can go on Facebook and I can go say, Kato, I'm friends with Kato. He's a humanist. Look at how good I am by association. That's what people are doing. That's what people are doing. And that's easy, but the work is hard.
The work is hard. I do agree with you because I've gone through it. The work is hard.
It is.
Some people, it's all about show off and positions and a few perks here and there, or pecs here and there. Now, Anya, in one of the comments, we are talking about humanism. We are giving the background to our subsequent episodes. You talked about people being in humanism for the show, participating in events with little to no integration, no growth. What is that I want to mean by such a statement?
Kato, I think I'm very different than most US humanists in that I did grow up in a very secular community that had, exposure to all these different systems of thinking. A lot of humanists don't have that experience. A lot of them do come into humanism as adults, and a lot of them have been traumatized by religion. So they're looking for a community that, acknowledges that trauma. And that is a lot of humanist communities. A lot of humanist communities do provide that. Yeah. But when you have a community full of very traumatized people who haven't addressed that trauma fully, it can be really restrictive to growth. And not just like growth in an organizational way, but also like individual, internal growth in, eventually you have to step away from that trauma and say, okay, I was traumatized. I have to move on. That's how I'm going to be healthy. And it's really difficult for a lot of people to do that when they're surrounded by other traumatized people that are feeding off of each other's trauma and saying, like, religion hurt me, religion's the worst. And it just becomes this venting fest, which, again, I think that's very important. We need those spaces. We need those safe spaces for people to be able to bitch and moan about religion. We need that. But it can't be everything, because if that's all that it is, then you're not providing space for other ways that people are oppressed. And really, that gets really tiring after a while, to sit around in a circle where everybody's complaining. This is reminding me of a time I went and gave a talk in the UK at the University of Sheffield. And these atheist and humanist students were very angry, very, very aggressive, and just really, really mad about religious people. And I was like, yeah, your anger is justified for sure. Okay, so when are we going to finish with the angry part? And when do we go out in the community and like do work that's productive, that helps people, that, we need that bit too, right? Because what's the point? We need the healing, but we also need to be doing the work. So I think people get tripped up on that, because when you're so caught up in your trauma, it's so hard to move on. And unless you have other people in the community that are helping lead that away from, sitting in this like trauma-soaked space, then it's really tough. So having those spaces be subspaces where you go and you have your venting session about religion, you talk and get your anger out and all of that. And then we go into the big group. And in the big group, we live humanist values and we do the hard work together. That's my vision. That's not how it works right now. But that's how I think we move forward, is by creating spaces, intentional spaces for people to do that sort of, healing work, but also recognize that's just a piece of our big humanist movement where we live these humanist values and do the hard work.
Yes, and do the hard work. Well explained, Anya, and I do believe that those following us are able to understand more about the issues we are putting across, more insightful and very appreciated. And yeah, you do talk about the ethical culture and humanist societies, organizations, or communities being unsafe. And the viewer may find it outrageous in a way. How come that human societies where we would be safe, communities where we would be safe, are unsafe? Why is she making that kind of allegation, if I can put it that way? Why is this that? What informs you to have this kind of assertion to say these are unsafe? It's quite big. Everyone is shocked.
Yeah.
And how can we make them safe? But first, why are they unsafe?
So, well, I've spoken a little bit about white supremacy culture already, and how it shows up. And I encourage everybody to go read the article that I've written, What is White Supremacy Culture? It's about a 5-minute read. It's pretty quick. And then there's another article that I've written about white supremacy culture and how it shows up specifically in humanism and in ethical culture. And in that article, I really go into detail about how that has specifically happened to me, to a lot of other people that I know, that I work with. And those are just some very, those are examples off the top of my head. I mean, I have so many, and so many on behalf of other people that I didn't feel comfortable sharing. And so that is one facet, is white supremacy culture. And that's a huge piece of it on its own. And I think one thing...
In the next episode, we shall talk about the white supremacy culture on its own and a few other things. But now we are going to have the pointers to the unsafe community.
Yes. Another facet of the lack of safety is the misogyny. There is a very serious misogyny problem within humanism, and a large effect of patriarchy. We still very much have hierarchical structures, not just in the positioning of the organizational structure, but in the social fabric of these communities. Who do you hear talking the most on behalf of atheists and humanists? Do you hear a lot of Black women speaking? No, you don't. Do you hear a lot of Black men speaking? No, not really. It's really mostly white men. And that is persistent throughout the movement. Another thing that I've really struggled with personally through being involved with this movement is the sexual harassment. It's bad. And I don't think people really understand that, but I get sexually harassed by humanist men regularly. And you'd think that it would be more like Christian men who have more of a vendetta against me because I'm non-religious. It's not. It's mostly humanist men. And I think a lot of them think they are entitled to do this. I think a lot of them think that because I'm part of this community that they can say these things to me, and they cannot. And I call it out every time it happens, and it kind of gets brushed over, brushed aside or pushed under the rug. And so one of the most recent examples of that was when I was sexually harassed by a prominent humanist that is from Argentina and now lives in Italy. I pointed this out. I made a post about it because he was very rude in the way that he communicated with me, very patronizing. And a lot of other humanists, not a lot, but another prominent humanist basically said, how could you do this? How could you say this about him? I was like, are you kidding me? Like, the screenshots are right here. Can you see the way that he spoke to me? So there's a lot of excusing this behavior because these men are seen as these beacons of knowledge and wisdom and humanist light that, their behaviors are excused. Well, they contribute so much to the community. And that's fine. I'm not going to say they haven't, but that doesn't justify poor treatment of women. And that's just one example. This has happened to me throughout my life in this community, and it sucks. I'm not going to lie. It sucks. And it does make it feel unsafe. I don't feel like I can show up fully myself. I do feel like I have to show up on edge and be defensive and make sure that, I'm not putting myself in a position where someone could do that. And that's just so unfair. I shouldn't have to do that. That's not okay. And I'm at the point now where I don't recommend other women to join this community unless they know everything that I've been through first. And then I let them join. If they say, I've seen it, and that's really not different from society at large. I mean, humanism is a microcosm of larger society. As much as it would like to be seen as having superior values, in practice, really a lot of the same behaviors. So that's what really makes it unsafe. There's a lot of elitism and academia invoked to try and overpower people and patronize people. And that's another thing we could get into at a different time, Kato, because I think that's a big subject.
Yes, I did appreciate that. I do appreciate that. And I want to thank you for being very professional, for not mentioning the names. Of course, I know the people have been following you. I follow your struggles every time you post. When I get a chance to check Facebook, I always go and check because I want to be in tandem with what you have posted. Of course, I saw the harassment and I saw the rebuttals and all that. Of course, I'm also taken by surprise when I see us men. I usually say us men because I can't say I'm perfect. I would say us men always patronizing women. The patriarch is still rearing its ugly head through us, thinking that we're going to control women until the end of time, if it can happen to be that way. I mean, you are very right. It annoys when we do that, and I can feel your pain, and I want to apologize on behalf of all the men that are misbehaving. Yeah, the ego we have as men, the patriarchy, the poor upbringing we have. You are spot on. Many of us misbehave. Many of us are not doing these things rightly. And I agree with you on that. It's a problem in the human societies, in our communities, and makes it unsafe for women to be vocal, to be more active. They are seen as a threat. They are, in most cases, put down. They are given positions as carrot kind of stuff. You simply give a position to someone so because you want to balance the board, make them be seen, be visible. At the end of the day, we have a few Anyas. When you look at it, we have a few of you who can be able to speak up for years, because so many credible humanist ladies I've known over the years have fallen off the precipice. She's active 1, 2, 3 years on the road, then she's off. Because I do believe this is what we are tabling. They reach a point when they get frustrated. They get overshadowed by men, by us men. And I'm saying us because I don't want to look selfish, excluding myself. We men tend to overshadow, tend to sit on women, even in humanism. And this should be addressed so that women are not simply given positions for the sake of it, but they're allowed to perform, they're allowed to speak up, they're allowed to criticize. They're not given for the sake of having them on team. They are also allowed, facilitated, supported to work, to be visible, to be within the movement for years and make an impact. And yeah, what we are saying is true to Africa. It's true to Europe. I don't know much about Asia, but I know that in Europe, in Africa, it's the same kind of story. We need to address patriarchy. I agree with you.
I would also like a moment, Kato, to give a shout out to the women in Africa that have been so burnt out by the humanist movement that they had to take a step back or step away because they were working hard and this movement burned them out. And that is a tragedy. And everybody should feel really bummed out by that because that sucks. It really does.
It sucks. It does suck. And we are going to be addressing that in more of our subsequent shows. We need to address this issue so that we can be able to point out where are our weaknesses. We can be able to rectify. Anya, you did speak very well that to some of us, this is work, which is unpaid work. But it's kind of a vocation that we entered into, that we were known as an atheist and beyond being an atheist. Because what's it in rejecting a God? Any fool can reject a God. Anyone can know that there's no God. God is useless. But to be a humanist, it takes extra calories. It takes extra efforts for someone to say, look, I'm going to take another step apart from being an atheist. But it reaches a point when you see humanist organizations behaving in strange ways that makes you regret why you wasted all this energy working with such people. I do agree with you. When you see the hypocrisy in our organizations, when you see the backstabbing in our organizations, I do feel your pain because it is basically the fact. And it's high time we did address these kind of things. And yeah, as we wind up, because now we have made our hour, 1 hour, you see pretty fast, and it's very interesting. And I always want to keep our shows short so that people can be able to enjoy them over and over. I'm going to give a summary, and after that, I'm going to invite you to make a conclusion, which will make us which will give us a foundation on which you can build a second show. Now, in your writings, you have talked about the problems in humanism. Partly here you have highlighted them, and of course I've promised that in the next episode we are going to go deeper into these things, elaborating them, giving examples here and there, of course without mentioning names, but of course talking about the real issues affecting our society so that we can be able to check ourselves. And I did promise that I also give you an addition on what you are saying by also giving examples from my own background. We are going to be able to give this torch into the issues that are not going very well. And yet I'll tell you how donors have disorganized our activities in Africa. I'll tell you this. On one hand, we want the donations, but on the other hand, they become a problem. They begin dictating to you. They begin messing up programs in a way. They begin taking sides with people doing wrong things. I'm putting wrong things in quotes, where you point out these things are not going right, but people simply play deaf ear, and then they call themselves humanist donors. I mean, these are things which are not going well with the arms that donate funds to these organizations, which are in most cases very poor, and then they keep on arms training them, driving them to their own agenda. Yeah. You know, and even when you point out that things are not going right here, because the donor has interest in a project X, they will not look at the loopholes you have pointed out. They will continue to do what you think doesn't benefit humanism, but it benefits individuals. And these are the issues we have been highlighting. And this is why I take your message very important, because it is killing humanism throughout Africa. Mm-hmm. It is doing a lot of harm. People are losing interest because of the white supremacism you're talking about. It is true, it's affecting us. It is affecting us in many untold ways, Anya. So as we wind up this very interesting show tonight, Anya, in your writings, and of course we're going to see it in the next episode, but I want to give a background. You talk about issues that have affected humanism. There's at one point when you compare it with fascism, and I find it outrageous. I say, wow, this is big a statement you make. You talk about a capitalism ruining humanism. Of course, you talk about heteropatriarchy, which is also another big problem. And of course, one other thing I should mention right now is you talk about elitism, you know. Mm-hmm. Now, Anya, in a word or two, not a word, in the next 5 minutes, I would like you to simply highlight briefly on these issues and give us a background on which we can base our next episode. You whet our appetite. You whet our appetite for the next episode. Those issues, why are they so pertinent in your submissions? Let us briefly get to know a little bit about them.
Yeah, so really, Kato, the stuff that we're talking about here are larger global issues. They are not by any means, only affecting humanism. They're larger global issues. We are just a microcosm of the world that are experiencing these in a more direct fashion because we have an organization where we can experience those things. But yeah, I mean, these are, like I said, systemic issues. They aren't individualist issues. These aren't about individuals at all.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so that's why I don't feel a need to name names at all, because these things are things that a lot of people do because we're socialized and conditioned to do these things.
And because they have inherited them, sorry to punch in there, because they have inherited them, they have taken over the same bad stuff from others. They have succeeded.
Yes.
Continue, Anya.
Yeah, no, exactly. You're exactly right. I mean, all of these things are things that are just socialized into humans, and they're coming into humanism and they're carrying this systemic baggage with them. So I don't want to point any fingers at any specific person because these are systemic issues. These are things that we all need to tackle together. They can't be it's not like a situation where, in the US we thought, we'll just get rid of Trump and then fascism won't be a problem anymore. Well, you can see now that fascism is very much still a problem in the US. And getting rid of Trump isn't doing us any good. It's not about one person. It's a system. So we have to take that on as a system and not pin it on any one person or one group of people. So that's really what we're getting at here, Kato. And that's what we're going to get into in the next episode, is really talking about each of these systems, white supremacy culture, patriarchy. And the way I see it, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, it's like a big puzzle, a big systemic oppression puzzle. And we've got each piece and they're all connected to each other and they all work together to create this oppression and the inequity and the disparity that we see today. All of these things work together to create these conditions in life, but also in humanism. So that's really what we're talking about.
Very, very impressive, Anya. Thank you so much. It's going to be nice always having you here on this platform. And of course, I know we are going to benefit a lot from your expertise, from your wide research, from your writing, from your travels, from your practice. You are a hands-on humanist. I know. You are not the armchair ones. We have so many armchair humanists who sit in their big offices with cooling systems everywhere, with tea on the table, and they talk about humanism.
Yeah.
They simply lecture us about humanism. Yeah, the armchair humanists in their big offices, taking tea and talking about humanism and directing everyone what to do.
Yes.
How to be a good humanist. Yes, and yeah, this is the real issues we are addressing, and they are spot on. And I have to thank you so much for giving us this time, sharing with us all these issues. They are quite pertinent. And yeah, as we sign out, I should point out this just briefly. There is an ongoing discussion within secular communities, within atheist communities, fighting themselves online, talking about issues of transgender, for example. And some of them has translated it as transphobia, where you will find atheists, you'll find humanists who are okay with gay people, who are okay with lesbians and homosexuals, and you're okay with transgender people, but not okay with them being associating with children because they think they're not giving the right image to children. They think they are indoctrinating them. They think they are promoting a kind of mannerism among children. They're talking about drag queens and all that. And yeah, there's a lot of discussion around that. And people are divided on this kind of issues. And of course, we do expect that we cannot agree always on the same thing. Some people want to protect their children against this. Others are saying it's okay. You can take all these drugs. You can do all these surgeries. Others are saying, no, don't do these surgeries on children. So basically what I'm saying is that we always agree to disagree. And that's the beauty of humanism. That is the beauty of free thought. You can think the same. But bottom line is there are things which we agree on. That we aren't going to be corrupt, for example. We aren't going to mistreat women. We won't be misogynists. We should respect each other. We should give each other room to speak. We should allow criticism. Why should someone be punished because they have criticized an organization? Why should they be ousted, manipulated out of an organization? Why is it that some people sit in their comfort zones and decide we no longer need this person in an organization? Now it becomes their organization. And why? Even when they are serving so well, because they are critical to this organization, individuals feel threatened because they think they own certain places, they own certain organizations. And yeah, these are issues that are pertinent to me. And I do believe pertinent to so many free thinkers out there. And I want to thank you so much for sparing this time being with us tonight. And I want to encourage you to keep on going forward, Anya. In conclusion, I would like you to give us your parting shot as we end our talk tonight, Anya.
Okay. Well, let's see. I just want everyone to keep their minds on what's called systems thinking, and that's what I've been talking throughout this about, is these systemic issues and how they affect us. If you're not familiar with systems thinking, give it a Google, and that'll give you a good general idea of what I'm talking about. But yeah, that's the parting thought I'd like to leave you with, because next time we're going to really get into systems thinking, right, Kato? We're going to dig in.
I love that. Anya, I've done studies on system thinking. I've done research on that. I believe people are going to enjoy your input on that. Of course, there are 7 spheres of life, how the world is moved by these 7 spheres, and the systems analysis and thinking. These are all awesome things to talk about, Anya. I want to thank you so much for giving us this time tonight, Anya. You have been great on the show. Spot on. I want to again apologize for our starting late. We had challenges with our power in East Africa, and of course the viewers, but I do promise we are going to have a better start next year episode, because you have given us a very good background, Anya. Thank you so much for making it tonight, Anya, and thank you much for viewers seeing us tonight. We are saying stay well, stay safe, and have hope. Keep it alive and keep going forward. Goodbye, everyone. Goodbye, Anya.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.